Good morning, everyone. We're just letting everyone in the room and we'll get going in just a second. Thank you for joining us and thanks for your patience. We'll get going in about a minute's time.
Morning, Wills. Damien.
Morning, Sandila. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Hi, Sandila. How are you doing?
I'm good yourself, Damien.
I'm good.
It's been a while. Thanks for coming through.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we are 33 strong, so let's get going. We are also streaming this on YouTube for anyone who's not able to access the Zoom. If I could ask you to please keep yourself on mute so that we can just avoid any background noise. And if I see that you are unmuted, I will also mute you. I'm just letting some more people in. There we go. Okay, great. Right, so welcome this morning to our Savrala members meeting. My name is Natalia. I'm literally going to be silent for most of this. I'm just here to make sure that Zoom does not conk out and that we are fielding your questions appropriately. If you do have a question or you would like to ask something, please do let us know in the chat, which is open, or you can use the non-verbal cue to raise your hand and we will then call on you to unmute yourself and to ask your question or pose your comment. Again, if I could just ask you to please keep yourself on mute at all times so that we can avoid the background noise. So without further ado, I would like to welcome you all and also welcome our GM Sandile Nswane, who is going to be leading today's session. Sandile has shared his PowerPoint and he is unmuted. So Sandile, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Natalia. Much appreciated. Yeah, I'll take over now from here. Thank you very much. Once more, let me welcome the members of Savrala. It's been a while since we last met. I think our last meeting was in August sometime, except for some of the sectional and those what do you call them, by the way, the subcommittee meetings that have continued to meet. We really haven't really met as a collective like this for a while. So I'd like to really thank the members that have come through. Just before we start, perhaps if I could just flag our competitive net notice, which is very, very important, I think, for us. All it just says is that this meeting is intended to, deal with, matters affecting the association, and there is no collusion at all that's taking place, and that is highlighted in red. Let me also take the opportunity to give a belated happy International Women's Day. I know it was yesterday, but as I prepared, I couldn't just help but, thinking about at least extending well wishes to our women folk within Savrala, and wish you all the best, this year. And with your leadership, everyone knows that you are the mothers of our new normal, and we really look up to you guys to guide us, and we wish you well as Savrala. Thank you very much. On that note, if I could just flag the agenda, which was circulated by our secretariat last night, I think yesterday afternoon, and apologize as well for perhaps the late circulation of that agenda. But basically, this is what we will go through. We'll go through the notices, which I will, give shortly. And then we'll look at some of the apologies that I've received, and some have been sent directly to the Secretariat. I would request that it's also important, just for record purposes, I don't really mind if people can just, those that have joined the meeting, bearing in mind also just that some could not, because of regulations within their companies, but have gladly joined us on YouTube. But I would appreciate those that are on this particular call to just sign in their names on the side and for record purposes. But we'll have those apologies also recorded. The last meeting I indicated was way back in August, and having flashed through the minutes, we'll basically just confirm them as a true reflection of what transpired at the time. There weren't really any matters arising from the minutes, which also plays well in that we'll focus on the business for the day. We'll go through the adopted 2021 focus areas, look at some of the car rental, update and leasing update as well. We'll give an update on ARTO, which is quite key at the moment. I know 2 weeks ago, I had sent you quite a comprehensive update on ARTO, and I trust that also helped the members get to understand where we are, but we'll give you the latest on ARTO. And then we'll look at MOTI 2021, the scenario planning session that took place last week, and look at other business. The meeting is scheduled for 1.5 hours, but certainly, people are busy, and which is why I really appreciate the time that you've, sacrificed for Savrala to support us. But if we can, we'll make it, considering the fact that some members have indicated that they'll only be with us for an hour. So if we can, we'll try our best to push, the substantive issues in that hour, so that those that really need to focus on other, business, they're able to be released. I'd like to just welcome the following new members. I know that the last time I had welcomed Talis Fleet, but the meeting really, we've since had a whole lot of other members that have come in, and I think it's important to also just reflect them. But we have in our fold Fleet Horizon Solutions, which is the leasing company, and Premier Group Supply Chain, and Gilo Consulting Logistics. I'd like to just welcome them as our new members during these hard times. I think as Savrala, we are really blessed that we have not lost any membership. We've managed to retain all the members. If anything, we have managed to gain, new members as well. And we are in the process of reviewing, new applications that have come through both on the rental side and leasing side. And those decisions will be made as soon as we've reviewed that. I'd like to welcome these companies and hope that they will also, enjoy the value that is derived out of being part of Savrala, this trade organization. And then I'd like to just take the opportunity as well to, I know that, these may have been introduced, the NEC may have been introduced during, the AGM last year and our last members meeting, but it's important for the benefit of the new members as well to just rehash as well and say, introduce our NEC. We have Kone Fente, who's within the Motis Group, who's the Savrala president. As vice president, we've got Derek De Vries from Standard Bank. On the rental side, Granville Salmon, who's with Pace Car Rental. Granville has been around for quite a while in the NEC. And then Ramasela Ganda, who's the CEO of Ervis as the vice chair. On the leasing side, we've got Brian Ross, who has moved from being vice previously. He's now the chairperson of the leasing side. And then Linda Kambule from Standard Bank, who's the vice chair. We are honored to have Martin Leyden, the CEO of Europcar, as the co-opted executive. We did have another co-opted executive from Heads. However, you know, there has been some slight changes. We will retain that, and you know, we're reaching out to Heads, obviously, to make sure that there is a replacement in that regard. And obviously, I am the general manager. So for those who you know didn't know the structure, and this is basically the board of Savrala, as we refer to it, the NEC of Savrala, that was elected in October 2020. Yeah, I think that's enough for now. Let me also just, I think it's important to also just indicate that you know, we are quite honored this time around to have you know, senior people within the leadership, because it makes the decision making fairly quick, in that you know, we don't have to wait, you know, for people to consult with their principals, and these decisions tend to be made. And as you can see, really we're honored to have fairly senior people within the leadership of Savrala. All right, if I could just move on again, and I did indicate that the minutes were circulated to yourselves, and you know, I trust that you've had the opportunity to have a look at them. You know, they covered a lot of what transpired in the last minute meeting. And if I could perhaps just have someone just confirm that they reflect, you know, what transpired in that meeting. I noted that there were really no matters arising out of those minutes. A lot of what is covered in there is basically done, and we'll look at some of the new issues right now. But if I could just, for formalities, just perhaps have a hand, someone that says, well, we can confirm them as a true reflection of what transpired. Can I see a hand? Or if you can see a hand, I'll appreciate, because from where I am right now, I can't see any hand really.
We've had Bradley put his hand up, Sandile, and we have a second in Jonathan.
Any second?
Bradley and Jonathan have both put their hand up.
Good. Thank you, Bradley, and thanks, Jonathan. So we'll record it accordingly. The Secretariat is also part of the meeting, so obviously, at least it does help. It will be recorded accordingly. And then the next item on the agenda is the adopted 2021 focus areas. It's quite important on a yearly basis, as you know, we do review what it is we want to focus on, and the NEC would go through the motions, basically looking at exactly what are pain points for our organization. And I must also indicate that last in January, we always have a CEO's meeting whose sole purpose is basically to mandate to, you know, the new NEC on some of the issues to look at. And that meeting did not transpire for various reasons, I think more relating to COVID and the restrictions and stuff. However, we were, you know, lucky enough in consultation, you know, working in collaboration with both the Department of Tourism and the University of Pretoria. We've managed to arrange that scenario planning, which I'll talk to later on. And again, it also gave us a sense in this period of recovery as well to ensure that at least we look at certain things that could form the basis for our planning going forward. But we have decided, you know, that the fewer the key areas, the better. And all of these are probably known to yourselves because nothing really new, except, you know, we are in a recovery mode. And these are the key focus areas that the NEC has decided we should focus on this year. And this is education, and each education plays a very, very important role in our lives to ensure that we at least have, we improve the skills shortage. In that regard, we are working very closely with SPS, who are now called the Stadio, to reintroduce and promote and market the fleet management training programs to Savrala members so that they can start enrolling in the new year. As you know that there was a break despite the fact that the contract was signed last year, but there was a level of inactivity in that area. So Stadio is to make available, the FML 400. A lot of work, as you know, went into building that, a very unique offering that was created by Savrala itself. So that study material will be made available online, because these days I think online training is quite important. So yeah, we'll focus on that. And then ARTO, which I will again address. We all understand the impact of ARTO, the administrative costs and significant business interruptions. Our businesses are enduring as a result of this. The industry vehicles that get blocked as a result of ARTO. So we have made a substantial, very powerful, basically, submission last year. And we were waiting for the department to come back to us on those submissions. They have since done that, and I'll give feedback on that. And then e-notice is again another important item, an activity that we've decided we have to focus on this. The industry is experiencing, significant delays when we need to bulk register and renew our vehicle licenses. We have in the past interacted with the RTMC in this regard, but with the introduction of e-governance, processes and systems, and this whole, project was basically kept in abeyance. But we will be resuscitating those discussions with the RTMC after the initial ones, as I said, were suspended due to the e-governance and certainly due to COVID. We'll resubmit our proposal. And all of these things, ladies and gentlemen, you do have quite a bit of work happening in the background. And there's a heavy reliance on member participation. Something I've always said, I'm a believer in, interacting as well. And as you know, as Savrala, we belong to the likes of BOSA. We belong to the likes of Tourism Business Council. I sit in those boards, and it's only, and we also have back-to-back relationships with other like organizations, the NAMSAs of this world, the RMIs, the trucking industry. And, all of them, there's one common thing, reliance on members. Member participation is important. So there's a whole lot of where we reach out to request for people to volunteer, to be part of those subcommittees. I will really appreciate if you make yourselves available or make your part of your staff available for those. And then the car rental. What I had arranged, I know that, I don't want to, I'm not too sure if you can see Granville, and is he available? If he's not, I'm gonna run through. I had already spoken to him, but I can run through. It's important. I've selected here. I've deliberately looked at, we've only got 1 month. Right now, we, Lightstone is still packaging our February statistics. But I think, what I'm just about to reflect is the whole of 2020. These are our stats in 2020. That also talk to the impact of COVID. As you can see, and how do I do away with this now? To do away with this. Okay, oh, there you are.
That Grenville has unmuted himself and also switched his video on. So you have someone tag team with you, should you wish.
Great. All right. I was just introducing it, and then I'll hand over to Grenville to run through quickly. But you'll see the impact of COVID on this when you compare the same period to previous years. Over to you, Gren.
Thank you, Sandile. Yeah, as you can see, there's been a significant decrease in the total revenue in car rentals, so down from almost 6 billion to just over 3 billion for last year. And you know, obviously, one thing just to remember is that the first 3 months of last year were very good months for car rental. So the decrease is 9 months of the year affecting the 12-month view. So it's a lot worse than what this shows. But there are other slides coming up where you'll be able to see this. So it's not nicely formatted on the left-hand side, but that's 600 million a month if you have a look. And then you can see if you can go to the next slide, Sandile.
All right. Okay.
At the top there, it's 600 million. And then you can see how good January and February were last year. And then March, although it wasn't great, it was very much in line with previous years. And then you can see April, where the revenue dropped to less than 100 million rand. So that's from almost 600 million. And March is usually a very good month for car rental. April is usually quite a good month for car rental. Cape Town's cooling off a bit, but you can see it drop way down to less than 100 million in April. That was when we had the full lockdown. And even up to December, it still hadn't recovered to even half of what it was in January last year. So that gives, that graph actually speaks volumes. Next slide, please, Sandile. Yeah. So you can see, and you know, this is very deceptive because the average fleet is 54,970. But one of the big things to remember there was sale of motor vehicles was actually prohibited under the lockdown regulations for April and May. It was only in June. So we all ended up sitting on these huge fleets for more than half of the year. And then we were only allowed to start selling in June. And really a lot of those transactions only really started happening in July last year. So the drop in the average fleet by 15.8%, you know, just shows how quickly the fleet dropped after June when we were allowed to sell vehicles again. And the utilization, I mean, you can see that's way down from the previous year, only 53%. So next slide, please. Yeah. And that gives you a very good idea of the sort of how long it took to recover last year. So obviously when you start tracking on that 20% utilization, that means your fleet size is about right. That means you're kind of running out of certain vehicles, but you've got enough stock, but not too much stock. So literally it was only in November and December that we started to actually see the fleets get to the right size again. And that fleet size was way down on our previous fleet size. So we were close to 60,000 in total. We're actually, close to 70,000, and then now we're just over 40,000 vehicles on the fleet. Okay. The number of rentals. So you can see this was devastating. And in a way, this is the amount of work we do to generate the income. But with the airports being closed or semi-closed, because obviously curfews impact the number of flights that are allowed to go at any time. So the actual number of rental transactions dropped massively. But one of the sort of things that helped was that the length of the rentals was better, because a lot of the especially replacement, that didn't really show very much of a decrease in the revenue. So you can see, if you look at 2019 and compare it to 2020, you can see inbound was decimated, local leisure was decimated. The corporate and the replacement industry had big decreases, but not as big as the others. And those are the industries that have the long rental days. So you'll see on the next slide, when we discuss length of rental, it was quite significant, the increase in the length of rental. So that gives you an idea of the length of rental, up from average of 6 days to an average of 9 days. So that says a lot. So yeah, I think yeah, a lot of us have got our fleets the right size. Now, obviously, the next step is to get the infrastructure the right size. So, or get the fleets up to meet the infrastructure where that infrastructure is fixed. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Grant. I think, you know, it really does tell a story. You know, our numbers do tell a story. I deliberately, obviously, you know, the members have heard so much. I think in our last meeting, in previous meetings, we've spoken about the impact of COVID as well on to you know, our industry. You know, everywhere you go, you kind of listen to the impact of COVID, but I think it's clearly reflected on these numbers, as I said in my opening remarks. But thanks very much. The leasing update as well. We just recently had you know, leasing reports on a quarterly basis. So the numbers that will be reflected here reflect the last reporting period, which was the last quarter of 2020. And I'm not too sure. I had also just spoken to Brian, if he is available. You know, if he's not, then we'll just carry on anyway. There are certain key items that leasing looks at. Obviously, I mean, we've got 17 members that are submitting, and you know, the key measurements that I looked at, obviously your operating rental that is managed, and then traditional FML. They also look at managed maintenance, but we'll run through those, and then they, you know, reflect as well on the vehicles purchased. Leasing is probably not, it wasn't as much you know, impacted, but there was definitely an impact to the leasing environment. We've recently developed these you know, graphs that also just indicate exactly where we are when it comes to, you know, the leasing funded contracts covering September to December 2020. And again, there, you know, a very sort of flat, you know, indications there. If you look at the performance on both corporate and government, pretty much flat, because there, you know, there's no, you know, downward curves as we saw with rental. And then the next key measurements is the you know, the maintenance plan contracts covering that same sort of period. Again, we're looking at government and corporate, how we're performing in that area. So you know, the pretty much flat. It's really there is no dips there. However, it's just obviously there's other issues relating to leasing that may have also just impacted on their business. And then the next key measurement is basically looking at managed maintenance plan you know, almost the same sort of, you know, graph. Basically, if you look at that, very, very flat, and there's no real dips in terms of the numbers there that are reflected on managed maintenance contracts, pretty much flat on both your corporate and government. And you know, if you look at the total, also just represents a good picture of where, you know, how these numbers have stayed flat. And I think that covers pretty much, oh yes, the purchases. I did indicate that the purchases, there is a dip there in terms of purchases, and these, you know, obviously, you know, the cycles as well. I think there was a bit of, you know, impact in terms of just the number of vehicles purchased, if you look at, you know, this period. However, you know, this number of just sitting around, you know, 6,190, it's about the average from around June, and it had peaked at 13,000, you know, in the same sort of period in December last year. So, so yes, we have experienced some sort of dip in terms of our purchases, both corporate and government. All right. Just to cover the industry highlights and some of the lowlights, and this includes both the leasing and you know, the rental side. The technical subcommittee, which had been, you know, obviously, you know, there was some inactivity last year as a result of COVID. But this, in a meeting that was held about 2 weeks ago, you know, the sectional meeting of the leasing section, you know, a decision was taken to resuscitate this particular subcommittee to ensure, you know, that constructive engagement continues with some of our OEMs. And a lot of good does come out of these meetings. And one of the highlights, I think, for last year, despite the fact that we've had some sort of challenges, is, you know, the publication of our leasing fair wear and tear guide. I had sent that link to everyone, and I'm sure people can now have a look at our you know, our leasing fair wear and tear guide, which was published last year. In terms of education, which I spoke to earlier, which remains one of our key focus area, it's important to note that, you know, we've always had these interactions with Southern Business School, but there were some developments, you know, that at the moment, SBS together with Ambery, Lysof and Prestige Academy is now formally part of Stadio Higher Education. In the recent meetings we held in Krugersdorp, actually, in one of the at the SBS premises, we met there with Dr. Kutsie, who runs basically that unit. You know, the contract remains. They will honor our contract. They will make sure that they continue honoring all, you know, some of the key things that were agreed upon with SBS. There was agreement on focusing, you know, on online training, which is certainly the way to go, especially during these difficult times with the pandemic. A great deal of work has gone into the development of Savrala. You know, that content program, as you know, it involved a whole lot of our members who, you know, who built that what we call the LSM 400, which is part of what they are offering. So these engagements with Stadio and SBS, you know, have taken place, and a decision has really been taken that they will embark on a marketing drive, you know, internally with us to ensure that at least, you know, we market these offerings that remain there. In that regard, we'll send out the new education, offerings to all the members, so that at least, particularly the leasing members. But I think it's important that that at least the decision has been taken formally with Stadio now, that will embark on a marketing drive to ensure and encourage members to register for this year and 2022 intake. In terms of SALGA, you may recall that we had established a subcommittee that formulated what we termed a tender template that would ensure some sort of uniformity in the way they evaluate tenders, and this was really welcomed by the SALGA, and we had a couple of meetings as well with their senior leaders. This would have involved Treasury as well, because anything has got to be signed off by Treasury. So this generic template was finalized last year, but engagements have since temporarily been suspended due to the change in focus. You may have noted that with the ongoing corruption and some of these municipalities put under administration, so the focus has really shifted to ensuring that at least services provided to our people. But not that this is off the table. We've kind of decided that at the time when all the dust is settled, then we'll resuscitate those talks again and ensure that we involve Treasury accordingly. In terms of the tourism safety initiative, it's important to note that this particular initiative was suspended by the Tourism Business Council of South Africa when it decided to suspend all related contracts, including online intelligence, who had worked with us for a while to basically, record and in their system all our fraud incidents, and unfortunately, because of financial reasons and the whole restructure of the Tourism Business Council. But we are now exploring, collaboration with ICB, which is Insurance Crime Bureau, and these we've always had a relationship with them. They have a relationship with the banking, organizations as well, and just tracking crime. So at the moment, a business case for Savrala to consider joining this community involved in fighting fraud and vehicle-related physical crime with the Bureau has really been developed. It's important to note that we have seen a dip in crime, almost obviously because there was inactivity. Last week we sat in what we call the National Vehicle Crime Forum, which includes a whole lot of other stakeholders, and the stats are reflecting that with the opening of borders, we're seeing the crime starting to rise, whereas it was quiet, obviously, with all the borders closed. So crime is adversely, it really adversely affects our sectors. It has a negative impact on the growth and development of business in general. And these threats posed by crime require an increased level of commitment and coordination within sectors, which is why we have to belong somewhere. We have to at least ensure that this collaboration does take place and it's formalized, and we utilize their systems as well that can at least help us look at history as well, but also track some of the known criminals that move around within the various, either the petroleum industry or the tourism industry, but they have systems in place as well. So we are at the moment looking at that. But the forum itself and ICB does bring parties together as a community to fight crime, as it were. Right. And then in terms of ARTO, the ARTO update, I had committed to try and move. I'm actually very conscious of time because I want to, at least if we could, cover some of the substantial issues and before within the hour to at least accommodate those that had indicated already that they have other commitments after an hour. I had circulated a very comprehensive update. I'm not going to start there, of where we are with ARTO, the fact that we had submitted it, almost a historical, update of, what is happening within ARTO. But I think for this update, it's important. There are developments after, the update I circulated to all the members. The NEDLEC Secretariat received the revised ARTO regulations and comments from government last week. And we then, the next ARTO task team meeting will be held on Wednesday, the 10th of March, which is tomorrow. I think it's important to note this. The NEDLEC ARTO task team is made up of the three constituencies that involve community. It involves labor and business. And business comes out of Busa. That's where Savrala sits. And then the last component of this task team is government itself. So what's going to be happening tomorrow is that a brief presentation from government on the revised ARTO regulations, which incorporates public comments, will be made to the task team. And then the comments from constituencies, there will be an opportunity for the various constituencies to make comments on the ARTO regulations. I must indicate upfront that having looked at what was shared with us, the revised ARTO regulations, we are concerned that a lot of our comments, our queries, and our concerns that were raised in our submission last year, I think it was on the 1st of December when we submitted, have not really been considered. So we are going to be making submissions to focus totally on some of these. I'll give, I'll refer to that in the next slide. So during this period, members were requested to use this period, obviously, which was from the 1st of March to the 8th, to consult and to obtain the mandate from their respective principals on the revised document. In that regard, our Savrala subcommittee met yesterday to discuss the final draft. This I circulated to those, and some of you have members who are, part of this subcommittee. So in preparing for this meeting, members were requested to review the document. One of the key things we're doing, obviously, is to ensure that we identify areas where Savrala or its members were either considered or referred to, and see if there are any changes, we had proposed that are incorporated in the draft regulations. And we went through, we are still going through that process, and it's targeted by the end of today, at least, we shall have finalized our approach for getting ourselves for tomorrow's meeting. One of the key things we're looking at is to compare the October 2020 submission, which I referred to, which was due on the 1st of December last year. Compare that the 2020 proposed regulations with a new set of proposed regulations and our comments. It is indeed a very time-consuming, process, but certainly a necessary one, so that we You know, our processes, our business process, very unique, and you know, having liaised with other parties, we are quite unique in a sense, and it's important for us to go through and comb the document. So the meeting yesterday resolved that in preparation for the NEDLEC meeting on the 10th, which is basically the day after tomorrow, 5 to 6 non-negotiable items, you know, those items that have a potential to bring our business to a standstill, will be compiled for presentation at NEDLEC. It's important to indicate that meeting also involved, you know, our legal sort of assistance. You may recall the last time when we organized a feedback to senior leaders, we had invited Claire, who is an attorney, and we also invited him. We will be preparing a very concise paper that I'll be presenting at NEDLEC on the 10th, that will focus very much on the 5 to 6 non-negotiables that we really have to drive home. The impact of you know, the very fact that you know, our concerns again don't seem to have been taken into consideration. I must also just stress that whilst you know, the whole question of litigation, you know, liaising with the other members, for instance, you know, our counterparts, you know, it lingers on. However, you know, Savrala's approach, as you may have seen in the update I gave you, we had reached out to the department. We had requested a meeting with the Minister of Transport to basically air our views and you know, air our concerns about some of the, you know, utterances that were made in the media that almost imply that you know, ARTO will be anyway, you know, implemented in its current form. Unfortunately, you know, up to now, we've made almost on a daily basis, I would follow up with the Chief of Staff, but you know, everything revolves around the availability of the Minister. So we will carry on. You know, NEDLEC is a constituted you know, process. It's a formal structure that's well, basically mentioned even in our constitution. It's a formal structure. So we'll go through those motions to make sure that our concerns are registered on the 10th. I think that's basically what I wanted to highlight in terms of ARTO. One of the key things, perhaps in closing on the ARTO, you know, update, is we have also noted the absence of you know, the CS report or CS study, which is the socio-economic impact assessment study. Those of you that have were following, for instance, the likes of when we went through that e-toll saga, one of the key things that is always a problem is, you know, the absence of such, because it does help when government you know, conducts a CS study. At this stage, what was presented to us is something that was done in 2015, and as business, we obviously concerned that the shared CS report or study has no relation to the proposed ARTO regulations that had been tabled at NEDLEC for deliberation. So this is something else that we'll look at, and business will further note, you know, that with concern. All right, I think it completes just the update on ARTO. Perhaps before we move on, I think it's important, I will allow if under general for members to also just ask questions. All right. The next item on our agenda is MOTI 2021. Now, these are the proposed timelines for MOTI. In fact, these have already been signed off. We're looking at the 27th MOTI 2021 survey, which will begin in earnest on the 15th of March. The questionnaires have been finalized. A whole lot of work, as you know, took place in I think it was 2019, where we had a review of the questionnaires, and it involves everyone, including the OEMs, basically all of us. And there is really no change in that area. So on the 8th of March, which is like yesterday, we finalized those questions. We've looked at the contact lists. I might still reach out, particularly the new ones, just to add, if there's any changes. What we've found is that with COVID, some people may have left the company, or they may have shifted around, so they're no longer responsible for MOTI. So I'll reach out to yourselves to make sure, just to confirm that what we have in the list is still valid. But the plan is to have these, issue surveys to the rental leasing and leasing companies on the 15th. The last day to return the completed questionnaires will be the 12th of April. And then we'll issue the reports, the round one reports, on the 3rd of May 2021. One key thing I wanted to just mention, which is also important, we could talk around it, in terms of just preparations, time was participation when round one surveys are issued, and following the instructions on the questionnaire as to whom to rate. That is, only those, you may recall, I think that's a very popular phrase, only those manufacturers from whom you have purchased vehicles in the last 1 year. There is a consideration that, perhaps we may have to, just for this year, stretch it to 2 years because of the inactivity that took place, for the better part of 2020, may have affected the purchasing cycles for some of our members, and they've kind of decided to keep those vehicles anyway. So this is something that we're looking at, but we'll advise accordingly if the decision is to stay with that 1 year or still go ahead with the 2 years due to COVID. And then the MOTI Awards are planned for the 21st of October. And as I indicated, I think the last time that we have explored, we've always had, I think for the third time now, third time, we've had breakfast, purely, as a request from the OEMs. But this time around, there was, members unanimously felt that perhaps we should actually explore a dinner time. And with the relaxation of restrictions, the relaxation with the MICE industry as well, I think, it looks positive that by that time in October 2021, we would have also just passed the expected third wave, if at all. But also, with the vaccination program, accelerated, that should also just see things being relaxed and going back to normal by that time. So we are targeting a dinner for the 27th MOTI, awards this year. The members will be kept abreast of those developments over time. Right. And then the next item on the agenda is our scenario planning session update. You may recall that I had sent a request to senior leaders, both at, on car rental and leasing, for an alternative scenarios for post-COVID future workshop that was organized with the Department of Tourism, the University of Pretoria, facilitated by Gibbs. I'd like to just give some sort of update. On the 7th of March, a scenario planning session was held with representatives from car rental and leasing sectors of Savrala. The session, as I indicated, was facilitated by Gibbs. It was also attended, by the Department of Tourism, some few members from the Department of Tourism and the University of Pretoria. Participants contributed to, interactive strategic discussions that took place there, and an online survey that was conducted by the facilitator. Participants in the session reflected on the way in which their sector enable mobility, which is basically what the business were in, facilitate human interaction, and are crucial to the development of an inclusive and growing tourism sector. The participants used, the scenario planning approach to address a key question relating to the state and shape of the sector after COVID, in particular, communication between the stakeholders, return to profitability, especially given the long-term impacts of the pandemic, such as a dramatic reduced demand environment. This is but a few of the things that they obviously looked at, but there's more. And based on identified trends, participants identified the likely scenarios and or strategic agenda for the sector. This was a very good, a workshop, well-run workshop. I think it sets us as well as a trade association, well positioned to also plan for the future. A report will be compiled, and this report will be shared with Savrala members, particularly the rental and leasing. Participants will also receive a scenario planning workshop attendance certificates. I'm finalizing those with Professor Berendin, this week, and then, I'd like to just thank, all the participants. My invite went out to quite a number of people, to all the identified, senior executives in these areas, but the attendance was not that good, even though we're really well above 20. A special word of thanks to all attendees for their excellent participation. Thank you for sharing your valuable knowledge with Savrala, and this will definitely be registered. As I said, it will also be shared with not only just the Department of Tourism, but also, the University of Pretoria will use the information, gleaned and that came out of the workshop for other initiatives as well. And in that regard, ensure that there's a continued relationship between us and the university, particularly with Gibbs as well. So I'd like to really pass a word of thanks to those who managed to participate. And then the next item is golf. we had packed golf, the Savrala Golf Day for years now. A decision was taken by the NEC that I think it's an important networking, event, as it were. So the preparations are underway at this stage. Whilst we initially had targeted February, March, but the reality is that we had to move that to May timeframe. There's a couple of things that we're looking at, obviously, in preparation for this. We're reviewing the lockdown regulations and restrictions, and there's some sort of level of increase in terms of gatherings as well. We're reviewing that. We've managed, through, as you know, we have our almost resident events coordinator. I'm working closely with Jody, who's looking at the various codes at this stage. We're looking at various codes from relevant MCs. We're looking at the perfect venues, perfect golf clubs that we could utilize. We're also looking at issues of sponsorship as well, and charity. There are restrictions as well in terms of what can be flighted at this stage. So we're making sure that at least we go for the best. So, but an official announcement and will be made, obviously, and we'll reach out to yourselves as per normal as soon as all of these items are done. Okay. That brings me to the last, almost the last slide on my presentation. Before I open up, I think it's important to just highlight one item which the NEC is currently looking at. We're re-looking at the whole membership contribution model. And in that regard, a subcommittee has been established to look at this. But I think it's important that, obviously, we communicate this largely to the rest of the membership, because it's likely to affect yourselves, in whatever form. But all of this is to ensure the smooth running of Savrala, where we can as well, to provide some sort of level of relief to our members. But at the right time, this will definitely be communicated to yourselves. I think I'm going to open just for any item that members would like to raise. But before I do, I'd like to just give an opportunity to Connie, just if there's something he may perhaps want to say, particularly with regard, the scenario planning session, and he also participated in that. I think it's important to just for him to just say something. So from where I am, I can't see anything really.
So Sandile, I've unmuted myself. Thank you very much. So I think maybe just thank you for your presentation, Sandile, and taking us through it so briefly. I think so. Yeah, not a lot from our side to add. I think it's all hands on deck for us with Arto. I think the the deadline of 1 July is looming over our heads, and I think we need to try and take obviously whatever action we need to try and protect our members' interests. So I think we, as a work group and a task team, have been tasked by the mandate of the members to try and derive a particular outcome. I think we are desirous to work with government to try and find a suitable solution for industry as a whole. But I think we have to also look at our members' interest, and I think whatever we need to do, we will do in that regard. So yes, I think thank you for your and the actual subcommittee's work on the actual whole Arto process and thus far. And I think the crunch time has come, so I think we will now have to try and advance our efforts even further and try and make sure that we actually get some type of positive outcome, hopefully before the implementation 1 July. I think then just briefly talk around the scenario planning. I think it was a great session. And I think once again from our side as well, thank you for everybody that's attended. I think it was well received by the university. I think the outcomes, I'm looking forward to the outcomes. I think Sandile has seen some brief outcomes this morning, and I think he'll share that with the members to come. But yeah, from our side, just a huge thank you to everybody that's participated in that. Thank you, Sandile.
All right. Thank you very much, Kone. I don't know if there's any other business or comments or any questions relating to, the previous slides that the members would like to perhaps, talk about or ask. At this stage, I'd like to just give an opportunity.
So if you do have a question, sure. If you do have any questions, feel free to let us know in the chat or just to use one of the non-verbal cues. And there were a few comments and questions that came through as you were running through the presentation. So Irene has asked if you can kindly share the contact details of new members to OEM. So that's just an action point for you going away from the meeting. Then we had a question from Bridget to Grenville asking for any information regarding Q1 2021. Is there any data available yet? And that was directed at Grenville.
Any date towards?
For Q1 2021.
Oh, I see. All right.
So
okay.
for this quarter. So January and February so far, I guess, would be.
Yeah, we can. We've got January figures, which Sandile was saying that it's such a small sort of period of time to compare that that's why we worked on last year's figures. We just thought that gave a better understanding of the landscape. But what we can do is maybe share some of the January figures with you, maybe in an email after the meeting.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Bridget, for posing the question. And then Gary wanted to know if Sandile, he could have a copy of the 2015 EIA that you were mentioning.
Oh, the 2015 EIA. Okay. All right.
Any other questions or comments?
All right. In the absence of any other questions, I have indicated that there is a subcommittee and the members will be kept abreast. Perhaps for me, it's more a request than anything, for members to, volunteer and participate where we request for, I've indicated that behind a lot of our work, there's subcommittees. And it is through those subcommittees that we're able to make traction. And also, whilst I can run with a whole lot of things, but certainly, I rely on, people who are in the cold face to also just complement the work we're doing, So I'd really like to formally make that appeal to members. And then the next Savrala members meeting is scheduled to take place in June, and this will be communicated nearer the time. And in the absence of any other business, I'd like to just take this opportunity to thank the members, for the attendance, and give assurance that we certainly are working full steam, particularly with ARTO, that is really so close to implementation. And we will definitely keep you abreast of developments in that regard. And that is it from me. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We look forward to further interaction in the near future. All right.
Thank you, Sandile, and thank you to members for joining us today. We are recording this and we will make sure that Sandile has a copy, the Secretariat has a copy so that it can be distributed to you. Thank you for joining us today and I hope you have a lovely day. Happy Tuesday. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.